The Seven
I don't know.
Kingdoms of Golf. I love it. It sounds like a book. This particular Masters in 2023, including the dinner, has to go well. It has to go well for the kingdoms to hatch their plot to correct golf's failing trajectory and get professional golf, on a positive trajectory into the future, and how that's going to shake out.
B-Team, the Champions Dinner at Augusta is probably going to be the most important event in golf since 1968. Because golf's in crisis. Golf is struggling. And at that dinner, all the kingdoms, all the power in golf that can save the game are there. What do you think?
I couldn't agree more. It seems maybe like an over-top statement for some in our audience, but the golf is failing. Pro golf, and when we say golf, we mean pro golf, but actually amateur golf is not on the rise either. But pro golf is failing, and therefore it's in a crisis. Forget LIV and what that has done to this crisis in the last year, but the game is failing because the audience is failing for many sports, many legacy media things, and that puts us in a crisis. So here you have it at Augusta and the Masters dinner upcoming, and the whole week really. When we say dinner, we mean the whole affair. All the players that are vested in pro golf continuing, if not flourishing, are there. So this is going to be topic 1, 2, 3 through 10. How do we fix our failing industry? And we all are invested in that, even though we're very different people. So who are the kingdoms, Darkstar? Who are we saying are these kingdoms in golf?
Well, you're going to have the four majors. Obviously, they're not going to be at the dinner, but they're represented at Augusta. The heads of those are going to be on the grounds. Obviously, Fred Ridley's at the dinner. You have the PGA Tour, and from now on, when we say
who
PGA
are the
Tour,
majors? So you would say the RNA representing the Open Championship?
the RNA representing the Open,
You know?
the USGA representing the United States Open, the PGA of America obviously representing the PGA, and obviously Augusta. And from now on, so the PGA Tour, and from now on when we talk about the PGA Tour, we're really just talking about the designated events, because the other ones are just going to be a minor league, and they become more and more minor as the days go on.
Not really relevant. A feeder tour for the designated events.
Not really relevant. And the two that people may take a little umbrage with are, obviously, LIV Golf is now a huge player in the sport. And despite them not even having an event yet, I think Tomorrow Sports is a huge, because it's going to be a huge piece. So those are your kingdoms. You got 7 kingdoms.
The 7 Kingdoms of Golf. I love it. It sounds like a book. Yeah. So to put a dot on that, the 4 majors, everyone can sort of, oh, yeah, of course. PGA Tour, yeah, of course. LIV Golf, okay, we'll talk about that in the next 20 minutes, 30 minutes, however long we go here. But Tomorrow Sports, to Darkstar's point, haven't even played. I mean, they haven't even announced their full lineup. I think we're up to about 12 players with Ricky Fowler's edition, which was a fait accompli going back to the beginning. Why they waited so long to announce that, don't know. Probably for some interesting reason. But Tomorrow Sports definitely
keep interest up, but go ahead.
Definitely a kingdom. So we have 3 tours: Tomorrow Sports, PGA Tour, LIV League or Tour, and then the majors. They're all there. They're all there with their top people, essentially. And if Greg Norman's not there, which he is not, then his consigliere is there, Phil Mickelson. And we'll get into why Phil is filling that role very nicely for Greg, in our view. But it is beyond fascinating. It's probably worth talking 2 hours. We won't go that long. But this particular Masters in 2023, including the dinner, has to go well. It has to go well, and we think it probably will go well for the kingdoms to hatch their plot to correct golf's failing trajectory and get professional golf, on a positive trajectory into the future, and how that's going to shake out. Does that sound right to you, Darkstar?
Yeah, they need to come to some common ground, but they all need to look out for themselves. And I think
every kingdom has their own little interests.
Every kingdom has their own little interests, and I see a little, old economics here, the Adam Smith, the invisible hand. They're all going to do what's best for themselves, which may save golf.
Well, because they have common cause. And
Right.
the enemy, my enemy is my friend, and their common enemy is lack of interest in the game.
And
in the game.
And they all want to enhance the game.
Correct. And now, who's going to come out on top of the new world order of golf? That's a different matter, but we have to save it first. We can't compete for the number one position, the pole position, so to speak, until we save it. So we got to save it. And will there be intrigue and plots along the way? Of course there will. These are rival businesses, but the industry itself has to be saved first, and they're all invested in that. So it's a fascinating story that we're going to enjoy talking about right now. So let's get into, perhaps, maybe you'll agree, Darkstar, the characters. So we've identified the kingdoms. Now, who are the key characters in each of those kingdoms? You want to take a crack at it?
Yeah, well, I'm going to start with, of course, the obvious. Tiger v. Phil. Okay. Tiger is representing whom? Who does Tiger represent?
Yeah. Now, how many people in the audience just thought PGA Tour? A certain percentage,
right.
You'd be wrong.
Yeah.
You'd be wrong.
Tiger represents Tiger and Tomorrow Golf and Tomorrow Golf's
Tiger
ability
Inc.
to take over the PGA Tour. And as we said, we're talking about the designated events. We talk about the PGA Tour.
Yeah.
Phil represents
Tiger
the
represents
LIV
Tomorrow
Golf.
Sports. He's the
Yeah.
king of Tomorrow Sports Kingdom.
Right. So, and then Phil represents LIV Golf, obviously. Are those two talking? We're going to debate
As
that
the prince.
later.
Is he the prince of LIV Golf? Yeah, that's probably fair.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes. But the more interesting situation for me is going to be Gary Player, Jack Nicklaus, the Europeans, and Ben Crenshaw, who I don't think people are going to think is that important, but I think he is important, and we'll get to that later.
We'll get to that. We'll get to all those guys. Well, who represents the PGA Tour? That's a little less obvious. At Augusta, at this critical meeting of all the kingdoms.
So I think the PGA Tour is represented, and I'll get right into it. It's represented by Nicklaus. It's represented by Augusta, to the sense of Augusta wants to keep decorum. So by the way, there's not going to be any fireworks at the dinner. The dinner is about innuendo, supposition, forming the alliances. You're going to ask a sort of vague question to Faldo or Langer, who's going to represent the Europeans, and see where they stand. Gary Player, I think, is going to be a more direct player, and he's got the South Africans, probably Adam Scott, who also sits with the South Africans typically at the dinner. Okay. The other entity that we did not mention, which we will discuss later, is the Ryder Cup. Zach Johnson always sits with Bubba. If these guys all still sit in their same traditional Masters seats, and Zach and Bubba are probably, I think they're the two guys that don't drink alcohol and do Bible study together. If they stay as friends, there's another person that you want to have on your side. So we're going to form a lot of alliances on next Tuesday night. However, there's not going to be fireworks. The media, unfortunately, is going to have nothing to talk about. So
let's bring in the next important tactical element of this plot, which to save global golf. It is the meeting before the meeting. So there's the meeting where everything happens. Those of you in business at a corporate level know this. It's everything is decided beforehand. You never go into a meeting with a broad constituency, which this dinner has, with various different opinions, of course, many opinions, before you've decided the core of what you're trying to do with the key players. And there's really just a handful of key players, and we're going to probably get into that next, the meeting before the meeting. So the dinner is a very important step. We'll talk a lot about that because there's a lot of wrinkles to that. That is, I think Darkstar put a nice dot on it, which is building alliances. So you trot out what you're about to do that you've already decided at the real meeting, and then you see who's going to be on board. So who are our friends? Who are our enemies? Who can we ally with? Who can carry some water for us? will some of those things be tickled out to some extent at the to some extent, and then you'll continue the conversation after you've sort of taken everyone's temperature at the meeting. Not everyone, but nobody's talked to Ian Woosnam yet. There's a lot. Longer, no. Faldo, no. Olazabal, no. There are a lot of players that nobody's talked to yet that they would like to have on board to make this go faster, go smoother, be more exciting. However you want to characterize that. Does that sound right to you, Darkstar?
Yeah, absolutely. There'll be a ring leader for each of the little sections. Mm-hmm. And that's who's ultimately going to help the decision, possibly even someone to fall on their sword for a cause. Let's not forget
and
that.
Fred's there. And we've already discussed, and you made a great point, that Augusta itself will make it quite clear in a gentlemanly way that there will be no ill will at this dinner. This is Bobby Jones's club, and Mr. Jones had a very specific level of decorum. And no matter, you may violently disagree or vehemently disagree with someone else's point of view, but you certainly behave as civilized people, as gentlemen, and that you will do that. Or, he doesn't need to say or. You don't want to violate Augusta's policies because you want to be invited back. And not only that, you want to be in their good graces because it is arguably, I don't know about the home of golf. Maybe that's the open. But it's an important place to be for sure. Let's back up to the meeting before the meeting and talk about that because that's where this plot is going to be flushed out. How do you think that meeting took place? Because we're saying it already took place and is going to continue perhaps at Augusta. But they've already had this meeting, the kingdoms. Would you agree?
I think most things are being worked out. The reason I think the dinner is so important because it's going to finalize the alliances. I don't think Tiger and Phil are talking as much as you think. We discussed this off air.
Yeah, we'll get into the case for each side of that.
And I think Gary Player is very important because as I've discussed in other shows, LIV Golf is going to eventually represent the rest of the world. And I think Gary Player is more of a world ambassador than anyone else in the history of the game, potentially.
But potentially true. But before we get to the characters, the meeting before the meeting, where the kingdoms are sitting down and having initial conversation about, hey, golf is failing, pro golf. We have an opportunity perhaps to fix it. And to fix it, not only fix it, but fix it in a way that we benefit. We, the kingdoms, benefit more, certain kingdoms more than others perhaps. How did that get started, do you think? Because I think the meeting already happened. And the meeting before the meeting was probably multiple meetings, just to put a dot on it. But how do you think that took place?
Yeah, well, I think there's two separate factions here. There's the majors, which is really led by Augusta and the R&A. And then you have the Tomorrow Sport, Tiger, PGA meeting deciding how much they're going to bring LIV into the fold. Now, did the meeting happen with Phil, Tiger, Greg, Rory? I don't think that's happened yet.
I don't think Rory's involved, but we could talk about that 20 minutes from now.
Well, Greg and Rory are obviously not at the dinner, but they're represented by
I don't think
Phil
Rory's involved in the meeting before the meeting. He's not important. No, he's not the king of that kingdom.
That's why my point is that meeting hasn't really happened yet.
Well, that's alliance building. Rory's going to do whatever Tiger tells him to do.
So tell me, what was the most important pre-meeting? What was the most important?
Well, the impetus. So who is the one that brings the plan? And you were touching on it there. Is it clearly Tomorrow Sports is a much smaller group, easier to talk about strategy and vision. So Tiger, we've said multiple times now, wants to own the PGA Tour. We believe that. So he's going to do it through Tomorrow Sports. Fine. Tomorrow Sports is its own tour. They're going to play a virtual game, but it's a tour. They have top players. It looks a lot like LIV. It's a team thing, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so is that group is probably the group that got the ball rolling, because you can't do anything today in pro golf without Tiger. It's just a reality.
Right.
Like him, hate him, it's just a reality. You can do things without Gary Player and Jack Nicklaus. They're old, unfortunately. But so Tiger you need. So he becomes the guy. So where does this start? It starts when Tiger decides he wants to take over the PGA Tour, and being king of the Ashes is not a place you want to be. So if he's king of the PGA Tour and Tomorrow Sports, well, that's no good if there's no audience. And if it's a declining trajectory, if nobody's playing golf, nobody cares about golf, and you're the king of it, who cares? So he needs to save golf, just like everybody else in this conversation, all the other kingdoms. So maybe it's Tiger that reaches out to whom? Now, you just mentioned this. Does he reach out to the PGA Tour? I don't think so. Who does he reach out to first, assuming that Tiger and his group, or maybe McCarley, he's a smart guy, the guy that's the actual CEO of Tomorrow Sports, running the day-to-day, who reaches out to whom? Let's just assume for the sake of conversation that it came from there initially. Who do they call? Who do you think? First.
Who do they call first?
First.
Boy, that's a tough one.
You know, Tiger and Mike are having a beer, and they come up with this idea like, you know what, we got to save this game before we can really become a big, Monday Night Football kind of thing in America. We need all these players, Mike. Who should we call first?
I got to tell you, I would call Augusta because of the connections, because they need fans, they need ratings, they need sponsors.
Well, that's one of the kingdoms. So you have 6 other kingdoms to call if you're Tomorrow to make the first call. And I think that's a great guess.
Yeah.
I think let's call Augusta. It doesn't have to be, could be Fred, could be somebody else. Tiger picks up the phone, probably does it himself, and asks to have a conversation, and they sit down and have a conversation. Maybe it's a phone call, who cares? But interesting, that's the first. And what's Tiger trying to do, and his team really, in that initial conversation, hatching the idea with Augusta National?
Well, his goal is, if he's going to enhance golf through Tomorrow Sport, it's going to be about drawing. The only place you can draw a new audience is essentially streaming, online, some type of game format, something that is quick,
Young
like
people.
a 2-hour
young people
Monday night
around
show.
the world to be interested.
Yeah, well, and we're going to have to disagree on this, because I think the only thing Tomorrow Sport is going to do is get people in the United States to watch on Monday night. Now,
Tiger has
around
a
the
global
world,
audience.
we
can debate that later on in the show. Tiger has a global following.
He does.
So, a kid in, pick a place, a golf country, a kid in Australia, a kid in Ireland might very well tune in to see Tiger Woods hit a ball into a simulator.
Yeah.
The Tomorrow Sports concept has some interesting elements to it. I'm not poo-pooing that at all, because sidebar, later on, maybe we get to the show, maybe it's a different show, making golf cheaper is critical, really, if you're trying to get kids to play and kids to get interested to watch. And, I don't know that that's achievable. I'm the gambling guy. I think that is achievable. Can you get kids to play if you make it cheaper? Yes, probably, more than play now. It takes so long to play. It's expensive. You got to have all that. If you can make it on a simulator and make that cool, maybe that does work. It certainly solves the, you have to belong to a club or find a club and go play for 4 hours or 5 hours. So that Tomorrow Sports has that going for it. Whether they can make it actually work, question to be answered next year. But I'm with you. I think they're talking to Augusta about how to do this. And maybe it starts, hey, we're all interested in saving golf. Here's how we think that needs to take place. What do you think what's the next entity that Augusta and Tomorrow are talking about then? And in the very next sentence, all right, well, who's the next kingdom we need to bring into the plot that will not so obviously fit in? Let me say it that way, because it's the most obvious thing to talk about.
Well, I don't know that they're. Yeah, I don't think they're going to call LIV. I just don't.
I think they do. Well, they don't call them. They don't call them right away. Yeah. They talk about it between themselves or among themselves. Like, hey, LIV has money, a lot of money, and we don't have a lot of money for golf. The members of Augusta have money, but they're not going to throw it at golf. So, but the Saudis apparently are willing to throw it at golf, billions at golf. How do we as Rory famously said last summer at the J.P. McManus. It's not that that lives in golf. It's that they didn't give us the money. He said that flat out. We have the tape. He said it on air. Yeah, we're not mad at them. We're mad at they didn't give us the money at the PGA Tour. So
if people are wanting to spend that much money in the game of golf, that's wonderful. I just wish that we could have got to a point where they were spending that money with the existing structure that has existed for nearly many decades within golf, instead of being this big disruptor. But at the end of the day, I think it'll, as I said, it will sort itself out, and it'll, everyone has to pivot and change and try to adapt and be better, and and hopefully we get to that stage. But as you said, right now it's sort of messy, and it's all the narrative isn't good. It's splitting the game instead of everyone coming together, and I think everyone needs to try to come together a little bit more.
How do we get their money and put it into the system? Well, the Saudis are not stupid. They're not going to give us money. They need to be at the table vis-a-vis LIV. So how do we do that? First of all, other kingdoms, Augusta first in this conversation, right? Tomorrow in Augusta in this proposed conversation that we're talking about, are agreeing that has to take place. I think they agree readily. We need capital. Yes, the Saudis have capital. Okay, so they need to be involved. Yes. And maybe they are not happy about that. Maybe they don't care. Maybe they're neutral. Maybe they're enthusiastic. Who knows? It doesn't matter. They agree that the LIV is a part of the kingdoms, and they're bringing them in. Okay, fine. Do you agree with that, Darkstar?
Yeah, well, they're obviously, the aristocracy of golf needs to save golf for themselves, if nothing else. So yes, they're clearly a player now.
You can't be king
They've had
of
a
nothing.
meteoric rise as far as any. There's never been a rival league come around as quickly as LIV in any sport.
Well, because they have capital. They have billions of dollars. Things can move quickly when you have not only billions of dollars, but have billions of dollars that are controlled by a guy or two guys.
Right.
There's not a lot of people you need to talk to in Saudi Arabia at the PIF to do what you want to do. It's why, monarchies and dictatorships go do things so quickly.
Very efficient.
They're very efficient. You don't have a Congress. You don't have a House of Representatives. You don't have any of that stuff. So they get the ball rolling, and now the LIV guys are in this conversation. I got a lawnmower going by. Let's see what? Yeah, it's a lawnmower. Let's see where he goes. Hey, keep going. All right, so the lawnmower has passed by. Very good. We're saying that the Saudis don't have a lot of decision makers. They control $3 billion, and it can, one or two guys. You don't need to meet with a lot of people, and that's handy if you're trying to do what Tomorrow Sports and now Augusta are trying to do in this scenario. So when do we talk to LIV? How do we talk to LIV? How do we make sure that they don't become the top entity in our new world order of golf? Because we don't want that. Not if you're Augusta and Tomorrow Sports. That's super important. We're going to get to that. But what's the next phone call? Well, I'll tee this up for you, Darkstar, and I want your comments here. So Tiger and Fred and Augusta and all that's starting to take shape now. This is several months ago. And who do we call next? It's not LIV. We know we can better predict where LIV will come into this play and what they'll say. But who do we call next? Do we call which of the three other kingdoms or four other kingdoms? Do we call the PGA Tour? Do we call the R&A for the Open? Do we call the PGA of America? Do we call the USGA? That's four. Who do we call next, Darkstar? What do you think?
Boy, that's a tough one.
It is. It's a very audience. What do you think?
Well,
we have to answer this question live, though.
We can rule out the PGA Tour, and we can rule out the PGA of America. It's either the USGA or the
All right, hang on. My lawnmower is coming by again.
All right. Well, I'm going to start like this. I can eliminate the PGA of I can eliminate the PGA Tour, and I can eliminate the PGA Tour of America. It's got to be the R&A or the USGA. It's the US Open or the Open is what you're looking to add to the mantle, because those are the big majors, and that's really what this all revolves around. The future of golf is revolving around the four majors. That's all anybody cares about.
I think you got the ball rolling right down the field correctly. Good, in my opinion. I think of those two, of the R&A and the Open, or the USGA and the US Open, it's going to be the USGA and the US Open. Why do I say that?
Yeah, I'm curious.
Because politically, your next call is you want another cooperative party. You want another co-conspirator who is firmly in your same channel. You want them agreeing with most of the things that you are trying to accomplish. You don't want to run into an obstacle right away, because the more co-conspirators you have, you can deal better. Hang on, here comes my lawnmower again. You need more, just to pick that thought back up after my lawnmower, you need more cooperative conspirators to get the ball rolling. Then you take on the next guy. Hang on. The more cooperative conspirators you have, then that group has more energy, more momentum, because we're coming from 3 different points of view now. We have Tomorrow Sports, we have Augusta on board, now we have the USGA on board. Now, if the R&A is going to be a little more ticklish, a little bit more of a different type of agenda, even though we think they're going to agree with saving global golf, pro golf, they're going to be fourth. Okay, why then do I say that the USGA is going to be easier to deal with, meaning they'll agree more with the concept than the R&A? Because the USGA is a different type of entity. The R&A has a longer history, has more ties with golf aristocracy in the traditional sense of that, meaning good old boy network. The USGA changes leaders more often. It's still part of the golf aristocracy, don't get me wrong, but it's an American institution, so sort of its cultural core would be change, adaptation, evolve. Just going to be easier. It's not quite as monolithic as the R&A. My sense of the R&A is that it's very traditional, very like the monarchy itself. It's a little more rigid in its structure. Fewer people to call to make change there. Whereas the USGA is members, and it's just a bigger, more, I don't want to say it's democratic, I'm not saying that, but it's a little more of a democracy than is the R&A, in my opinion. And I'm splitting hairs. I'm not saying the R&A is not that, but it's less of a democracy than the USGA, even if it's just this much, which I think it's probably more like that much. But even if it's just a little bit, the USGA is going to be easier to talk to. And hey, USGA guys, whoever they call, the president or the CEO, I forget his name offhand, or it's one of the key board members, whoever, we want to save global golf. Here's what we're thinking. And the USGA is like, yeah, global golf. Yeah, we need to do that. Sure. And our major, the US Open. Sure. So now they're talking about the details. I don't think we have time for that today, to what are those details. But they're agreeing that saving global golf's a thing. That's a number one priority. So yes, let's do this. And the USGA then, after they agree, their first question, and really only meaningful question that's at the top, is what about LIV? What do you do about them? And the first two guys, Tomorrow and Augusta, say, we need them. They have money. They have players now too, but they have money.
Right.
And the USGA says that's true. To throw at golf. Yeah, okay. Now, everybody knows that they don't want LIV to run the show, but they're a kingdom and they need to be at the table. Yeah. Are we on track so far?
Absolutely.
I think so.
Yes.
I think so. And then who do they call next? Now we got, 3 guys, 3 kingdoms on board out of 7. Next phone call is timeout. We got lawnmower guy. The next phone call after the first 3 kingdoms is Darkstar. Crack at it.
Well, now you got to call the R&A.
Yes.
You have to.
Yes. And they say, what do you think they say?
Well, I got a couple ways to go.
Let's add a juicy detail. Who calls them?
Yeah.
You have 3 kingdoms that can reach out. Which of the kingdoms
My point is,
reaches out?
I think LIV should have called them first. LIV should have called them a long time ago.
That's a different topic. Those kingdoms might be having, we're going to get to that in this show, I think. Those kingdoms might be having side conversations, but we're talking about this plan to save global golf. You have Tomorrow. You have Augusta, the first 2 kingdoms reaching consensus. Now they've included the USGA. Now you have 3 kingdoms in this plot, and now they're going to reach out to the R&A because that's the natural next entity. And hey, 3 kingdoms, who should reach out to the R&A first to get this rolling, to get them on board?
Augusta. It's got to be.
Yeah, it can't be Tomorrow. It's Augusta. It's Augusta. And I agree with that, and I would think the audience would agree with that. which only serves to, among other interesting things, but among that list of interesting things, it serves to notify all of us again, who is the real heart of global golf? Augusta National. I think that's true. They're making that call to get the R&A on board. It's not tomorrow. It's not Tiger. It's not the USGA. It's Augusta National. And that we just went through highlights that. And I think that's right. I really do. Right. So now Augusta, maybe it's Fred, maybe it's one of the wealthy movers and shakers at Augusta. They have many. Calls somebody they're probably very close to. Hey, get Bob to do it. He is tight, who knows, or whomever. Get Sally to do it. Her father is on the R&A. It could be familial. It could be a deep and meaningful, lasting friendship. Somebody there is close, and they have a bourbon, I'd like to think, and they get the ball rolling, and now the R&A comes on board. Okay, fine. We can skip over some of those details of how that happened, but now the R&A is in the fold because why? Why would they agree to this? Because they want to save global golf, and they agree that it's failing. Okay, we got 4 entities now, 4 kingdoms, 3 to go. Who's the next one? Who's the next kingdom to bring on board?
Boy, that's really tough. I still think LIV is going to be an outlier, and you got it now. Well,
we're down to PGA of America, PGA Tour, and LIV. Those are the 3 left.
Well, I think now you got to bring on the PGA Tour.
I think that's right.
And when we say PGA Tour, we're talking about the designated event, so you can get the whole thing working together. Oh, and as I've said a zillion times, golf needs to go back to a 6-month schedule.
Don't get off topic.
I'm not getting off topic too much, but you got to get the PGA Tour now.
Yes, and why are they more important than LIV or PGA of America at this point in the kingdoms getting together? Because they represent corporate America. They have global corporations, not just corporate America, corporate global entities. From whoever, pick a name, UBS down to Alcoa, down to IBM, Accenture, whoever. All those are sponsors of theirs, so they have contacts all across there. So that's more money potentially, not enough, not like LIV money, and all those entities I just mentioned that have money, those corporations where the PGA gets their money, and advertisers. They're hard to talk to because they all have something different that they want to accomplish, and it's mostly about advancing their own products and services. That's not LIV's situation. They don't have to talk to the Saudis about any of that. We want money, here it is.
Right. And let's not forget that the PGA Tour still represents the majority of what fans are remaining, and they also represent all
in America.
those...
In America.
Yeah, and all those top players also that really haven't won a major, but they're trying to make into stars.
Yeah, you'd like to keep a Rory and a Spieth and a Thomas, I guess, or no, Rahm. You'd like to keep a Rory, a Spieth, and a Rahm, fully engaged because they're popular players currently and they're the top. So yeah, we need those guys, but they are part of the PGA Tour and maybe to some extent part of the Tomorrow Sports, but not in a strategic way, and not Spieth yet at all so far in Tomorrow Sports. But okay, so now we got PGA Tour. They're a little more interesting to talk to though, and unfortunately we don't have the kind of time in this show because we'll have to do a whole nother show. What is the PGA Tour going to say to the first 4 kingdoms about this whole idea? What, LIV? They're our enemy. How is that going to work? I mean, we want to save golf and everything, but we can do that without LIV. We don't need LIV to save golf. I can imagine Jay Monahan saying that. I'm not saying he's the voice of the PGA Tour necessarily, but that's a little bit more of a conversation than the other guys. Maybe PGA of America would be easier to get on board. Let's call them next. Maybe we should. Maybe they do. They're like, no, we don't want to talk to the PGA Tour. They hate LIV. Let's talk to PGA of America, get them on board. Of course, they'll come on board. We don't know. That's like a coffee and a donut with them. Okay, they're on board. So now we have 5 kingdoms. So now when you go to the PGA Tour, hey, we're going to do Save Global Golf. We'd love for you to we need you to be involved. We love you. You need to be involved. And PGA Tour says, great, of course, we'll do that. Well, how do we get rid of LIV? And the other kingdoms say, well, don't get rid of LIV. No, they have the money. No, we need them. And the PGA Tour might say, well, no, screw that. No. We're not interested in saving golf if it includes LIV. And then the the Augusta, again, being the broker of all this, says, well, everybody else is on board except you. The 4 majors plus Tomorrow Sports with the key players, Tiger, Rory, your guys that really aren't your guys. Another reference to our episode last time, Dark Star.
Yeah.
Tiger is the enemy of PGA Tour.
Tiger's the enemy of the PGA Tour. Yeah.
So we have, we have everybody already lined up PGA Tour. So we really don't fight us on this. What?
Yeah.
Can we get the margin call clip?
Yeah,
Don't fight us on this.
I'd really appreciate if you didn't fight me on this one.
Yes, we need you on board, and LIV has the money. They have the money that we're going to need, so they need to be involved. And this will be good for you, and we'll show you how. You can flourish. LIV can flourish. There's different leagues in cricket. There's different leagues in just about everything that has a big team. There's different soccer entities around the world, right? And they do just fine because of each other. They do better as a collective. You need League One, you need the Premier League, you need the Champions League in soccer. You need those things. You need the American League and the National League in baseball in America. You need those things, and you're going to be one of those leagues that's critical to the weekly playing of pro golf, because the 4 majors are only 4 times a year, and you and LIV are going to do that. Make sense?
Right. Exactly.
I think we're on track here.
Well,
so then the last phone call is to LIV. They're the very last ones to call, and that's because they have already indicated that they're interested in everything we just said. LIV has said from the beginning, yeah, we want global golf to expand and grow and flourish, and we want the PGA Tour to continue. They have not said otherwise. And hey, guys, they want the majors to flourish. They just want to play in the majors. They just want to play potentially against the PGA Tour in a rival match. Great. It's all good for LIV. They just want a seat at the table, and now we're offering them one as the other 6 kingdoms. You see that coming together like that, Dark Star?
I see it coming together like that. Now, did we even mention the PGA of America?
Yeah, they were the 5th phone call because...
But they're just kind of they're kind of like the redheaded stepchild.
Yeah, they're important to an extent, but what we wanted was the PGA of America with their major and their club pros and representing, giving lessons and catering to the rank and file amateurs in America. And maybe they have relationships with their similar entities in other countries like Australia and South Africa, the UK, et cetera. But they were easy.
Right.
And we needed them in case the PGA Tour gave us any static about LIV. And they probably would have given us static. Right. We needed to bring them along and explain again why LIV is important to them, and not to want to get rid of LIV, that they shouldn't be.
Because the PGA Tour needs to realize that the majors need the LIV players at the majors.
Yeah, yes, for the health of the game. But remember, the game is failing, and everybody needs the game to survive. Otherwise, they don't survive. So everybody's going to have to give up a little bit. PGA Tour, you can't be the only tour anymore. Sorry. Or else the game goes away. We need LIV's money. We need their money. And that's what's available to us right now. Tiger's going to retire. And that guy moved our sport hugely and delayed the inevitable. But since Tiger has come and now is on the verge of retiring in the next 3, 4, 5 years, which is practically, tomorrow, cord cutting happened. People in America, the largest television market, have dropped cable television. They've stopped watching. They've stopped watching TV. They've stopped watching recorded shows. They watch live events, and that's even now dropping. In addition to that, video games came along, and kids play that. You go to the store, there are video game shirts. There are not shirts for sports leagues. Some, of course. Yeah, there's cricket teams, there's circuits, yes. But there's a lot of video games, shirts. It's indicative of where we are with the global market.
Yeah.
And sports can become irrelevant. I can't think of one that's doing great except soccer, global football, soccer, and maybe Formula One to an extent. Maybe cricket is more of a regional thing.
The big
it'd be interesting to know
is
Australian rules football and how that's doing with young people in Australia. I don't know the answer to that.
The big difference is we, growing up, people our age knew all the players in all the major sports. It was a treat in America to watch a game. Then cable TV saturated all the markets, and now everybody cuts the cord, and we're like, well, who cares? I can, there's 10 million basketball games on. I'm going to watch one a year, maybe.
I think it has more to do with YouTube, video games and
Well, sure, there's
digital,
much
let's
more
call
to
them
do.
digital distractions.
Yeah,
So
there's
you know, in the mid '90s, you didn't have a lot of digital choices, and then in the 5 years ago, starting 5, 6, 7 years ago, you had a lot of digital choices, and all the eyeballs on YouTube watching how to play Minecraft when you're 10 are not out playing wiffle ball, cricket, soccer. Pick your sport. Pick your sport. And that
cable TV had a monopoly in the 90s and early 2000s. They had about a 15-year monopoly, and they put sports on everywhere they could because it drew.
Well, it was the only thing that was working.
Ratings, and it was the only thing that was working. And now it's gone. It's dead.
It's
Period.
It's dying. It's another show that some of the sports you wouldn't suspect are in trouble. I think, and it's just my own thinking, that they are in trouble. NFL football in America, I think, is in trouble. And they are certainly not going to say that, but I don't think they're growing. And if you're not growing, you're contracting. There is no status quo. You're either getting bigger and better or slowly faltering. And then there's failing. And the PGA Tour is failing. And they're going to run out of money soon. And other sports are having trouble. Not all of them. I think soccer's doing fine. They're the healthiest. I think that's unequivocal. Okay. You want to go to the characters. Look at this. Show is just progressing on like a racetrack speed here. Well, it's a big topic. We're going to have to probably table some of it.
We're gonna have to maybe cut it off and go to a second dinner. I'm always up for two dinners myself.
Yeah, we'll plow in. We got to get to the central characters of these kingdoms because that is fascinating. Here we are at Augusta. Now we've set the table. Now we're at Augusta. So the plot to Save Global Golf has come together in the previous 3 months, since the end of the real golf season last, whatever that was, October, the President's Cup, and then October, November, LIV wrapped up, and here we are. So they had plenty of time. They've had, 3 months to have conversations and get ready for this event, which is the Masters dinner and the Masters chance to build alliances, I think is what we're saying. And who are the characters? Time out.
So obviously I'm remote here. What is going on?
They're mowing the grass. They do that. They're mowing the fairways.
Mowing the fairways.
The characters in our play. Then we're gonna use Augusta as the stage. So here we are at Augusta in a couple of weeks, and the characters are assembled during the weekend leading up to the dinner on Tuesday, where certain tactical things have to happen. They're going to sort of have a beauty contest, as I would say, or a bake-off. They're going to start advertising to smaller constituencies, the Jose Maria Olazabals of the world, the Nick Faldos of the world, guys that they need to get on board, would like to have on board, just to make this go really smoothly and bigger, faster. Let's go bigger, faster. Speed to revenue, speed to saving this thing. And everybody could be on board. That'd be great. So they'll do that at the dinner. Now, who are the characters? We alluded to them earlier. Go. I know you want to talk about the Stark side.
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna start with the potentially one of the two goats, Nicholas. Obviously, Nicholas is not a central character, but if you go back to 1968, Arnold Palmer said, "Hey, Jack, I need you to come with me." And Arnold reached out his hand, and Jack shook his hand, and Jack gave Arnie the blessing and said, "Okay, I will go with you, and I will support you." Nicholas is there, and I think he's just going to give his blessing to Tiger, and Tiger represents Rory and Tomorrow Golf, and he's not going to have much more of a role than that. And I think one guy who's more important than people think is Ben Crenshaw, who has become the keeper of the game. He is the liaison between the players and Augusta National. And they do need to get Ben's blessing.
When he's the
ambassador of the dinner. He's the host of the dinner.
Augusta, right? If you want to
he sits next to Ridley. He sits next to the champion. He is the,
he determines
Harvey
the seating.
Penick.
I think the seating cards are Ben's.
He takes care of. He is the sort of the master of ceremonies, and that is unique to this dinner, and it creates a situation where they need his blessing because it's going to be a lot easier for Tiger and Rory and all these guys to say, hey, Ben, this is what we want to do. We think it's great for the future. We think it preserves the past, more importantly. And as long as Ben's on board, he goes to Fred Ridley, and Fred says,
Fred's
okay, Ben.
Fred's already involved. I think your point was that Ben would be, and I would take issue with you. Maybe we can have a small debate over Crenshaw. I don't think he's need. I think it's nice. It'd be nice to have Ben on board because he's very well liked at Augusta, which is the most important player in our kingdoms. And, Ben knows members. And if Ben started whispering in all the members' ears what a terrible idea this is, we can do it a different way. Maybe that slows things down and makes it, speed to revenue gets slowed down. But I don't think Ben can stop it because he has no influence over Tomorrow Sports and he has no influence over LIV. And LIV's coming.
Right.
LIV has their money. They're coming.
So I guess the real character then that I want to discuss that I think is also bigger than most would think is Gary Player. I think he's the George Washington of the Revolutionary War. He's the guy who is global golf. He's the guy that brings all the characters together from outside the United States. As I said, Gary sits with Trevor. He's going to sit with Schwartzel. He's going to sit with Adam Scott. And I think there's enough respect for Gary that the Europeans will also kind of side with what he does, where he comes from. Mm-hmm. And the Europeans obviously are what made the Ryder Cup into a real rivalry, as I mentioned earlier. And the Europeans need to be on board to get sort of the game surviving with the two major leagues, the designated events, which is the PGA Tour, and LIV. And that's still going to be that's still the central character in golf.
I think you've touched on a great point. Let me highlight it. That Gary Player's stock and trade is not cash. He's not at that level. Not that even if you were a wealthy guy like Nicklaus is fairly wealthy, you wouldn't be throwing that money at golf. So we don't need your money. But his stock and trade is respect, as Darkstar touched on. If you are the most respected, let's say widely respected, so everybody respects Player, if that's true, probably is, and worthy.
Certainly worthy of that.
That puts him in a unique place to talk to everybody, and have a cup of coffee or a brandy or a bourbon and say, this is why he's kind of the Ben Franklin, to borrow another American history item, perhaps, of the Constitutional Convention, which is, look, we know you guys have differences, said Franklin, but let me remind you that we need to save global golf here. And here's what's in it for you, and here's what you're going to maybe have to give up. And Gary can do that, assuming he believes all of that. I agree with Darkstar. I think Gary Player is that guy. He's the most obvious choice, assuming he's willing to do it and assuming he believes in the cause. If he's, believes in the revolution, so to speak, or believes in the union. Do you think he believes it?
Yeah. Oh, his initial comment certainly shows that he was on the side of LIV Golf. So I think he wants to bring everybody together.
He wasn't against it.
Yeah, he wasn't against it. He certainly never spoke out against it.
True. He was. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, so I do want to get the cast of characters out there because the most misrepresented character is Phil Mickelson. Because despite what the media would have you think, Phil was the guy that played the games with the young golfers. Phil was the guy that took the young golfers out to dinner and befriended all those guys. So he has a lot more trust and respect. And that's what allowed a lot of guys to go over to LIV. Bubba Watson, Dustin Johnson are not on that tour without Phil Mickelson. And I think he is the central character as far as bringing the two major leagues together. And I think still to a great degree, probably, although Greg is a great businessman, and obviously he's not at the dinner, Phil's maybe a little more level-headed and has a little bit, has a good business sense, and he always was the guy that the young guys trusted. Tiger wasn't Tiger was at the course at 6 a.m. and was off the practice course by 9 a.m.
That's the point. I can see audience members rolling their eyes at the Phil is level-headed. I can see the comments now. Oh, Phil's the guy that blew the money gambling, and he's the guy that made stupid decisions. He's the guy that said the stupid thing about Saudi Arabia a year ago.
Yeah,
true. But let's set that aside. What Darkstar's primary point here is, Phil, and I'll bring Gary in here for you if you don't mind, Darkstar.
Go ahead.
Gary Player is respected by everybody, both sides, the global players and the American players. I wanted to get in that 3 of the 5 players in history of golf that have won the career Grand Slam are at Augusta. That's a fascinating wrinkle in history. Player, Nicklaus, and Tiger are all there. Only Hogan and Sarazen are missing. And the actual only Grand Slam winner, meaning he did the majors in 1 year, all 4, Bobby Jones, it's his house. So here you have the 3 living of the 5 career Grand Slam winners sitting in Bobby Jones's house. I mean, the sense of that should even affect Tiger. I mean, if you at their level of achievement in golf, you have to sit there and go, wow, maybe there are forces outside of where we sit at work here, because what a beautiful thing. Here we are at Bobby's house discussing the future of golf. Wanted to get that in there. So player represents global players. And
to clarify, we do know that, well, just to clarify, Bobby Jones won the old Grand Slam, and Hogan, of course, was the 5th for all
I said that.
The modern Grand Slam.
Hogan and Sarazen.
Go ahead.
With the other 3 guys. Right. And then Jones won the actual Grand Slam. Nobody else did. Nobody's ever done it. There was only one Grand Slam available to Jones, and he won it.
In 1 year.
He won the 4 that you could win. Hold on. I got another crew. The spreader just went by. Thank you.
Doing a lot of work on the course today.
Yeah. So anyway, Gary, I think that's a really cool. Let's all take a minute and think about what's going on here. That's pretty neat that we're in Bobby's house, the club that he built to enshrine golf, so to speak, all the greatest qualities of golf. Anyway, so Gary Player represents the global players, has their respect, and the respect of the Americans. But Phil, to Darkstar's point, he has the respect of the American players. Let's think about it right now live. I don't think there's anybody at this in the kingdoms hold on. So Phil he has the respect of the American players. American players, the players on the PGA Tour now, to Darkstar's point. He has cultivated those relationships over the years, and I can't think of anyone, and maybe Darkstar you can. Audience, maybe you can. I can't think of anyone that's representing a kingdom, that would be Tiger and Phil really as players, that would have more respect from more players rather than Phil. True? Anybody?
No.
I don't think so.
No, not even.
So they trust Phil. Phil has made it his point to, I want to do this thing with LIV because the PGA Tour is ripping off the rank and file.
Right. And the more and more this has played out, the better Phil really looks. When you look at it from an objective standpoint, you look at what the PGA Tour is doing, copying the LIV model. All of a sudden, the money shows up. Phil's been right, as we know.
100%. Everybody needs to thank Arnold Palmer for putting the PGA Tour together. Everybody needs to thank Tiger Woods for coming along and making it twice as lucrative, because he brought in that kind of new audience and younger people to watch. And now everybody needs to thank Phil Mickelson for quadrupling the money. Tiger doubled it. Phil has quadrupled it. And that's where we are. And not ironically, but interestingly, created an environment with Greg Norman and with the Saudis and whoever else has put this together at LIV, that there's billions of dollars available to potentially save global golf. And here we are. So keep going with your players. Now we got Gary Player representing sort of the internationals, the Euros and internationals, and respected by all. So he can have that conversation with everybody about what they need to give up to potentially get something better, which is saving golf. Phil has the ear and the trust of both LIV players and PGA Tour players, so he can broker both sides of the players and get them on board. We already have Tiger. Who else you want to bring in?
Well, I think the Euros are sort of the fly in the ointment where they stand. You have potentially a guy like Faldo, who's become more of an American in a sense.
Lives here.
Is he kind of anti-live? Faldo I don't think is a wealthy man, so I think there's some jealousy there, and obviously the Longers, etc., who created the great Ryder Cup rivalry. I don't know where they stand. Those are the guys that are the wild card, because the younger Euro guys, the Westwoods who took the live money, there's possibly a rift there, which could create problems such as the OWGR and the RNA. So that's the wild card. Those guys are the wild card. I think I briefly mentioned, Zach Johnson right now really represents the Ryder Cup and its potential future.
Well, bring that in. You're going there, go there, and let me give it a couple of words and then keep going. So let's consider the Ryder Cup and the European Tour, the DP World Tour. Let's look at those two entities as dukedoms. They're not kingdoms. They're not big enough. But they're important, dukedoms. They're the next little size down in the monarchy, so to speak, right, in our metaphor. So the Ryder Cup and the European Tour, interesting entities. Go ahead. Zach Johnson's at the dinner, and he's not part of the plot, but he's now Ryder Cup guy.
Sure, he's the Ryder Cup captain. Zach is, of course, one of the most respected players on tour. He's accomplished probably more than anybody with his physical abilities.
Accomplished more with less than anybody else?
More
Is that
with
what you
less.
meant?
Correct. That's what I meant, yes.
Two-time major winner, right?
Two-time major winner. And if I had to win two, I'd probably pick the Open and Augusta, of course. That being said, now he's the Ryder Cup captain. He's buddies with Bubba, who's defected. And the Ryder Cup is potentially dead. All right, let's be perfectly honest. If the LIV guys don't play and the United States wins, 25-3 or whatever it would be. I don't even know how many points are there. I can't even remember off the top of my head. 28? They could literally win like 25-3. I mean, as I mentioned before, there's a couple guys right now that are qualified for the European team that I've never heard of. So, the Ryder Cup, and remember, what is the Ryder Cup? The Ryder Cup is a ratings bonanza typically. It's been a ratings bonanza since the Europeans have started to really, they've won a lot of Ryder Cups recently.
It's the fifth major in reality.
Yeah.
Because it's not even fair. It rates... maybe it's second. I don't know. We'd have to go look it up. Audience, look it up. Is it the second highest rated event behind the Masters? Maybe. Could be. Yeah. I don't know. That. That's a really interesting point.
It's a huge event, and this is where the tours and the kingdoms and all the dukes and all the lords need to come together to save that event.
The Ryder Cup.
And the Ryder Cup.
Well,
because right now, the way it stands,
something in there before you move on past it?
Yeah,
so
go ahead.
I can hear audience members crunching and saying, well, the LIV players that are kind of remove talent from the Ryder Cup, as Darkstar just said, are old, and by and large, and they'll be replaced. Maybe not this particular Ryder Cup, but certainly the next one after that. We have said, and we continue to believe, that if nothing changed from where we are right this minute, LIV has an advantage in recruiting amateurs out of the colleges of the world, out of the amateur ranks of the world, and putting them under contract at LIV because there's more money. And that's very attractive to a high percentage of those young guys. Will they get everybody? No. Will they get a lot of them? Yes. Will they get a bigger percentage of European players who now have seen their tour destroyed, the European Tour, the DP World Tour, destroyed by the PGA's new scheme? Are they going to be easy targets for LIV? Yeah, I think so. I agree. So, yeah. So the Ryder Cup on the Euro side is getting weaker over time. Weaker.
Right.
And Sergio Garcia is a legend. If Sergio says the Ryder Cup sucks, then all the kids in Europe that are 18 right now and 16 and 12, they go, okay, yeah, screw the Ryder Cup. Let's go play LIV. Yeah. Let's not overlook that. I think Sergio is a very effective recruiter for LIV. And because he's got all the cards on his head, come here, make a lot of money, we'll have fun. You can play in the majors, It'll be great.
Yeah, well, look at who Sergio brought in to live with Answer and
Yeah.
all the Latin American type players. They all followed Sergio without question. So
yeah, to an
yeah,
extent, that's probably true. Sergio has been an important factor, yes. I think on the European side for recruiting, yeah, I think, and Poulter, I think, is a popular guy. Who else is over there that's maybe even Graham McDowell? I mean, I don't know about Westwood. Those guys are all important to recruiting.
McDowell was a gritty player. There's a lot of guys that can relate to a Graham McDowell because of his style of golf. The guys that don't have the great physical abilities.
When you and I were talking yesterday about GMAC, Graham McDowell, potentially getting $40 million for a 2-year deal with LIV, that is likely true just because of where the information came from, that shall go nameless. But so I thought that was a big number, but it's apparently Darkstar doesn't, and the information is pretty good. So all that together, okay, let's assume that Graham got $40 million. And I'm like, why is that possible? It occurred to me, Darkstar, in the middle of the night last night while I wasn't sleeping, that, if you told me, I wasn't thinking it when we talked about it originally, but if you told me that LIV had another strategy in addition to getting Masters winners over, which they've done brilliantly with 6, and they're all recent winners, do they want to collect European Ryder Cup captains? Well, they've done that. They've got all the Ryder Cup captains, right? Pretty much.
Yeah.
They got Sergio, they got Westwood, they got Poulter, they got Graham McDowell. That's
Stenson,
4 captains.
They just kicked Stenson.
Oh, right. And they got Stenson. Yeah. So they got him too. They got all the captains. Graham McDowell's already been a co-captain, right?
Yeah.
And those other guys aren't even old enough to be co-captains or captains. And they got them all. I mean, who was the next captain, a preeminent choice for captain that's not on LIV? There probably is one, but who would it be?
Well, like I said, where do Faldo and Langer and those guys stand? That's the curious thing.
They're not going to
such
captain
a
a Ryder
wild
Cup
card
team anymore, I don't think. Well, I guess they could. You think Langer's going to go I guess he could. Yeah.
Sure, he could captain another one.
Yeah, he could.
I mean, let's face it, he dominated whenever he dominated that. Where was it? At Oak Hill, they dominated the Americans when
that's
Langer
another
was
reason
captain.
that's a good point. Good point. And I think a well-liked and respected guy, certainly at Augusta, probably worldwide. He's kind of quiet. Quiet, I mean, he doesn't go out of his way to be, real social. But he's a character, absolutely. Worth at the dinner, worth having on board to move things along quicker. You could do it without Langer, but it'd be nice to have him on board. And why wouldn't he want to save global golf as much as anybody else?
So the point is, Zach Johnson, some of those Euros are important because the Ryder Cup is still important. It's something that needs to be saved along with golf.
Yes. Yes. A rivalry between the two biggest golf playing geographies is a good thing. And letting the best players play for their respective sides would be important. So let's segue, because we're going to have to start wrapping up. Even though we got a lot more to talk about, we'll have to put it in another show. Let's segue into the current arbitration that's going on in Europe, in England, in the UK, over whether LIV players can continue to play on the DP World Tour. That the hearing has been had and is concluded, the few days of hearings, and the arbiter's decision, which will be final, was set to come out, and has Darkstar, what has happened to the decision?
They've delayed the decision till sometime in April. Let me say that.
Shocking.
Sometime in April. Would it be?
It's been delayed.
Would it be after the Masters potentially?
I think the over and under there would be 100%. Yeah,
you're pointing out the incredibly obvious and leaving the merely obvious for our own imagination.
Yes. It's fascinating for audience.
Love that phrase. Yeah,
we have this information to share with you if you're not watching and paying attention. And some of you are, and probably some of you have other things to do. The arbiter's decision has been delayed until sometime in April is what they're saying. And that sometime in April could just say, until after the Masters. they'll delay that. And we speculate that whether it's yes, they can play or no, they can't play, either way, it was worth delaying it so that you didn't get in the way of the run-up to the Masters. Is that what we decided finally?
Yeah, you didn't want to get in the run-up of the Masters. And, of course, some things are going to come out of the Masters that the public are obviously not going to be aware of, but obviously are very important, germane for the future of golf. Mm-hmm. And that's what's really coming out. And that was the whole point about the Masters dinner is the discussions that are happening around the dinner. The alliances are going to be formed, but the discussions are around the dinner. We're not going to interrupt the dinner.
No, Augusta is going to make sure that the dinner goes according to tradition. There'll be chit-chat before and after with these ancillary players that they want to bring along. Because they're going to talk about it anyway. Ian Woosnam, and I use him because, those guys are going to talk about it anyway. So you might as well have your Phil Mickelsons and Tiger Woods of the world putting out a storyline or not. I don't know how they're going to play it. They've talked about it. I would assume the plot is unfolding, so they're all in on it. And they want the dinner to go a certain way for sure, to move it along. Why? Quicker, faster. We don't have all the time in the world to save global golf. We got to get on it. The clock's ticking. It's going to take years to get this interest moving. We got to get moving. The PGA Tour is going to run out of money. The Saudis may lose interest. Who knows? Right now we have an opportunity. Let's go. And we're getting to the characters. Is there any big characters we've left out so far, Darkstar?
I don't think so. I think some of the things that people are going to wonder and say, what about Patrick Reed? What about Jordan Spieth? I think they're playing. Reed's not going to say anything. No. He doesn't want to stop. He doesn't want to stop getting invited to Augusta. And Spieth has just been deadly silent.
And Phil has an easier time talking to his crew. I mean, they've orchestrated all that. Whoever it is that's going to do the talking, if it comes to that, or when it comes to that, they may each have an assignment. Hey Patrick, you're close with so and so. Maybe not. I don't. Right. If he's buddies with so and so, Bubba certainly probably has a job because he's very popular at Augusta and very popular in general. Sergio has a job. All those guys have a job. Maybe even Charles Schwartzel has a job. Who knows? With Gary Player potentially, right?
Right, and some of the big names, a Tom Watson, a Fred Couples, they may say a few things, but I don't think they're really relevant players. They're just not really that relevant. I mean, Couples has said a few things, just I think to get in the media. I think his agent said, "Hey, say something about Sergio. Yeah. You got to get some press."
You might make a few bucks.
Watson is obviously famously had the issues with Phil Mickelson at the Ryder Cup, and we found out again, Phil ended up correct.
Phil was dead right at the Ryder Cup. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
He was. Well, go ahead. I want to say something about the Ryder Cup and the arbitration.
No, go ahead. I think that's pretty much everybody. I quickly glanced at a list, and there's really, just for completeness sake, there were a couple big names that stuck out, but they're not that relevant. So
well, it's interesting that they're not interesting, right? So Tom Watson doesn't have a role to play. That's interesting all by itself.
I don't think he does. No,
I don't think he does either. And Jack Nicklaus is sort of a peripheral player. I think they kind of want him, but Jack represents the audience that's, passing away every year. That's not going to be around. Unfortunately, it is unfortunate, but time marches on, and the game has to be focused in part or in large part on younger players and viewers.
And Nicklaus represents Marlon Brando in The Godfather after he passed the reins on to Al Pacino.
There you go. But this arbitration thing with the DP World Tour and the LIV players, I suspect that if put on the spot and say, hey, what do you guys think? Their ThinkingManShow is going to happen. I think they're ruling in favor of LIV players being able to play. Why do I say that? I say that because the aristocracy in Europe, the golf aristocracy, has to recognize that the current European Tour, DP World Tour named, if the PGA Tour is in trouble, the DP World Tour is dead. It's dead. It's a nothing now. It's a feeder tour for the PGA Tour and not a good one. It's very arguable. Darkstar, you might have this answer. Would I rather play on the Korn Ferry or the minor league PGA Tour? Is that a better pathway to the real tour, the super events, the super tour, than the European Tour? I think so. I don't think there's any reason to play in Europe.
I think it's an easier pathway.
Yeah, it's easier in America. And that's the way I say that because that's the way PGA Tour wants it. They want it that way. And so what's left of the DP World Tour and DP World being based in Dubai, who knows how long they're going to stick around to sponsor the thing. Then what happens? So they're in trouble. And I would set forth one possibility that's likely, maybe probable, is that everybody in Europe knows that, of course, and that the LIV players playing might actually, would actually help quite a bit. It would bring attention. It would bring eyeballs. It would be good for LIV guys. It would be good for Europe. So why wouldn't we do this? And the arbiter can be talked to by the golf aristocracy, of course. That's how things work in Europe.
And I think that's why they're waiting till after Augusta. They can, they're trying to slip it in maybe just under the wire.
Well, I agree with you. Your point earlier in show prep was that they won't announce the arbitration decision, whether it's yes they can play or no they can't play. Either way, it gets in the way of, it causes a conversation you'd rather not have until after the Masters, when you want eyeballs, because there's a trough between the Masters and the PGA tournament, a lull in the action. So drop in the arbitration there, and now you have social media buzzing, you have golf fans buzzing about the decision and what's that mean, and if it's pro, it's more of a conversation, as I just said. The reason that I think it'll be yes they can play is because it's so much better for everybody.
Right.
It's better for everybody.
I think
except maybe the PGA Tour.
If they're not short-sighted, if they're not myopic about their decision, if they're actually trying to do what's best for golf and save golf, they should rule in favor of LIV. Now, if they don't, then they are still of the position that they can destroy LIV golf. Because I just pulled up who's qualified for the Euros. You got Rory and Rahm. You got Victor Perez and
for the Ryder Cup you're talking about?
What's that?
What are you talking about?
I just pulled up who's qualified presently for the European Ryder Cup team coming up in Italy, right?
Okay. Yep.
So you got Rory Rahm. Okay, great. Victor Perez and Yannick Paul. And then Hatton, Hovland, Lowry.
Right. So Hovland and Shane Lowry, good players.
Yeah. So you have decent players. Now,
it's a 12-man team.
What's that?
It's a 12-man team.
And so you got to, then who else are you going to have? Now,
you got 8 other guys that you need to fill.
Right. Well, you don't have 8, but you have whatever.
Well, they have 4 top
5 other guys. Yeah. Anyway, the point being is then they're going to have a very weak team without the LIV players. Anyway, it is what it is. I pulled that up for you're gonna put Rose. Well, Rose is playing better. Fleetwood. You have a reasonable team, but
yeah, Justin Rose, he deserves a mention there. Yeah. So maybe they have 5 solid players. Maybe there's 6. I don't have it in front of me. It's a good point.
But they're going to have a couple guys. I mean, the question is, it's in Italy. Do you take Molinari? That's why they put it in Italy. You thought Molinari was going to be a steady player for a while after he won the Open, and he's fallen off a cliff.
Well, the Eduardo's been named a co-captain, I think. Right? I think so.
Co-captain. Well, obviously
Eduardo,
Francesco. Francesco won the British, and
and he presumably be on the team, playing.
Oh, I mean, he's struggling.
Well, I understand that. Well, his putting probably left again. Came back, and left again.
Left. So, anyway, I for the betterment of the game, you probably want to have some of those guys on. Who knows? Yeah, so I agree. I think his putting's gone. He's struggling. Do you put him on the team regardless? That's a good question. Now that they have so many captains' picks, I think you probably do.
It's another show, but he's one of those guys. Maybe the kingdoms are talking to help it speed its way along. All right, we're gonna wrap up where we want to, because there's a lot of the stuff still, and the plot will continue to unfold, and wrinkles will come up, and what we aren't able to get to today, because this is a long show, is Well, exactly there are different interests. After you get past the first priority, which is saving global golf, pro golf, then it starts to get interesting because the interests of the RNA and the Open are going to be different than everybody else and vice versa. So the LIV Tour and the Tomorrow Sports Tour, fascinating conversation. I personally have a lot to say about those two tours and how they relate to the PGA Tour, and I kind of put it in that order just to tease a future episode, hopefully soon. Tomorrow, LIV, PGA Tour. Well, that's interesting. Why wouldn't the PGA Tour be on top? There's reasons. There are reasons.
Yeah.
And it's not shaping up that way. Money has to do with it. There's different reasons. We're going to get to that as a different show. But so we're going to be glued to the Masters here at the show, Dark Star and I, right? And we won't hear any of this. None of this is going to be released in the press. None of it, right?
They've already said they're not leaving the actual media that gets invited to Augusta. Don't be talking about this stuff and making the Masters second.
So how the kingdoms start to actually put jock for position, is that right?
Jockey for position.
Jockey for position. So how they jockey for position with each other is going to be, the second part of the story. And we won't get into that today, but there's a lot there, obviously. And there'll be wrinkles. There's stuff that, there'll be some ill feelings and different things, and they'll have to come back to the primary mission, which is saving global golf. But none of this is going to come out at Augusta. So we'll be glued to the TV, just like you guys out there watching, but you will hear nothing of this probably. And then if there is talk of LIV in any meaningful way, meaning somebody's in the hunt, like a Reed or somebody like that, that would be, because there's a bunch of guys qualified by virtue of being in the OWGR still, not just past winners. So LIV probably has, we should have that number. I don't. It's 10 or 12 players maybe altogether that are going to be there. If somebody's in the hunt, then that's great for the plot because it just moves the plot along even faster. But other than that, I don't think we're going to hear anything about it. There's no reason to get this out in the media yet. No, I don't think so. If something comes up, obviously we'll cover it. So we're going to be glued to it, watching and seeing how the plot unfolds.
Yeah, I don't think I think the media is going to have I'd be surprised if they even mention who's on which tour on Sunday when somebody's in the hunt. I don't think they will. I think there'll be enough buzz about the whole event. I hope there is a little bit of a rivalry. It'd be great for the game. It'd be great for the ratings, although Augusta's the one place that doesn't need the ratings.
We'll see how the streaming works. They can continue to build that out, and it's a great model.
That's the best thing about Augusta.
And then all the gambling data will be running through there someday. Yeah.
Well, that is the one thing. I'll bet you. Let me tell you this. I'll give you some odds here. I'll bet you they don't mention the odds on the Augusta broadcast like they do every 30 seconds on the regular.
True.
Yeah.
They won't. Yeah. That's true. But if it were there, when it's there, it'll be inevitable. At some point, they'll have to. They'll be forced because if the game goes the way I think it will go, with gambling being the number one revenue source, they can't not do that. Pick 5 years from now, they would have to address it. It would be too instrumental to their audience. So
yeah. And just real quick, you had mentioned at least 10. I want to say there's almost 20. I think the number I heard was like 17. There's a lot more players on LIV at Augusta. Yeah,
that's awesome. Is it double digits? I'm sure it is.
It's way over double digits.
Yeah.
I think it's like 17. Because remember, like a Taylor Gooch qualified for some reason. You got Koepka and you got DeChambeau for winning majors. Oosthuizen,
Smith.
What's his name? Smith. And you got the guy who finished high up at the PGA. What's his name? Peretta. And then...
well, let's get real. Well, we can leave on that note because we got to wrap it up. But Cam Smith is a favorite, isn't he?
He's
Why wouldn't he be?
No, he's not a favorite. He's like probably fifth or something.
Well, favorite. He's one
of the top 5 or 6.
Top 10. He just won the Open. He lost. He finished second last year to Scheffler, didn't he?
Yeah. No. Well, he faded.
Faded, but
Rory had a backdoor second.
Did he?
Yeah.
All right. Well, so Cam Smith is either fifth or he's in the top 10 to win the thing. Well, we'll see the odds. I'll be rooting for him. I like Cam Smith a lot, and I think it'd be good for the game to have a LIV rivalry coming down the stretch. It'll be a preview of future golf events.
Yeah, absolutely.
It'd be awesome. And right there, first at Augusta. That's another thing that Augusta probably thought about. They could be the first ones to have this rivalry play out on their stage. That would be at Bobby Jones's house. That'd be awesome.
It's interesting. Yeah, this is so you have.
I would love that. I would love.
You have sort of the two leagues set. So you're right. Yeah.
Yeah, it'd be phenomenal. Yeah, Tomorrow Sports wouldn't figure into it yet, but right now that would be phenomenal. Well, when Tomorrow Bar buys the PGA Tour, it won't matter. They'll keep it going. So in a sense, Tomorrow's there in this particular rivalry. All right, for now, B Team is out.
Dr. Darkstar's out.